Okay, 8.3 level 1. Remember way back when we started simplifying square roots and we said with square roots you can't have a negative, so we would say with no solution. That's because we haven't talked about this thing called imaginary numbers. So when you take a square root of a negative, it doesn't really exist because no number times itself is going to be negative without three numbers being multiplied together. So with the square root, I'm still going to break it down how I normally would into 6 and 6. And then since I have a pair here, I can take the 6 out. But because the 36 is negative, I'm going to have a 6, but I'm going to include an I in it to represent that it's imaginary. Okay, so with negative 27, I'm still going to simplify by 9 and 3, and then 3 and 3. So I have a pair of 3, so a 3 will come out. And because the 27 was negative, and I'm taking the square root of it, I need to put an I there to represent that it's imaginary. And then inside will be a positive 3. Okay, so because the I is on the outside, it represents that somewhere along the way, I took a square root of a negative number. Okay, and then in C, I've got the square root of 49, so I know that's going to be 7 and 7. And again, because that 49 is negative, I'm going to take a 7i. That's going to equal a 7i. And then just like before, I'm going to just multiply when I have a number out front. I'm just going to multiply by the negative 3. So this answer is going to be negative 21i. Okay, and last one in D. In D, we've got two separate roots multiplied together. What we don't want to do is multiply them and then simplify. And the reason behind that is because if I multiply negative 81 times negative 4, that's going to become a positive, and that's going to get rid of the imaginary numbers, which is not necessarily true because I have an imaginary number with the negative 81 and the negative 4. So the imaginary number doesn't really technically go away, and the negative doesn't go away in this case. So here's what we want to do. We want to break down both of these separately. So if I have the square root of 81, I'm going to break this down into 9 and 9. So I have a pair of 9s, so this is going to come out. And then since it's negative, I also have an I. Same thing with the 4. I break it down into 2 and 2. And then since it's a negative 4, that has an imaginary number. So I have 2i from the second one. And now I'm going to multiply these together. So 9 times 2 is 18. And I times I is I squared. The last thing that you have to be careful of is this I squared term. Now I squareds are different than just i's. Okay, I really equals is like the square root of negative 1. Okay, because the square root of 1 is just 1, but since it's negative, it's just 1i. Okay, so then I squared would be the square root of negative 1 squared. So when you have a square and a square root, those two are going to cancel each other out. So I squared just equals negative 1. So because I can simplify I squared into being negative 1, I'm going to simplify this I squared in my problem. So I'm going to have 18 times negative 1, which equals negative 18. And that will be your final answer. Okay? So when you have two square roots multiplied together, break them down separately, and then simplify the i's if you can. If you have an I squared, that always turns into negative 1.